Julie.
Just, it's okay.
Hi, Julie. Hi.
Okay, wait, hold on. Yeah, it is. Hi there.
Hi there.
Are you Pamela?
I am Pamela. We met long ago. I came and met you guys briefly at Firefly.
I'm sorry.
I met you at Firefly a while back.
Sorry.
No worries. So I have a couple of questions for you.
No.
Excuse me. Okay, children, come here. Come see what's happening. Come here, kids.
That's okay. I'm going to do a couple things on my
No, I
end.
was just getting you. I want you to meet my kids here. Here's Elliot and Jessa and John. And
Wow, it's a pile.
I know. They're my big kids, and so different.
I'm hoping my daughters, I have twin 19-year-olds who, by the way, ferment often.
Oh,
We have
awesome.
we have a whole bunch of stuff in our fridge, but today I have some other items, but I'm hoping that they'll join us as well.
Awesome. And so, I'm just gonna, John's helping with some lighting, and I can use my phone. I could sign in on my phone and put it right here and turn the volume off if that would be better.
Well, I think the question is right now I see you, but I won't see anything that your hands are doing.
Right. And so we're gonna just play around with this.
Yeah. And I'm gonna add a second one on my hands because I also have a setup in my kitchen. So I'm gonna also let myself in.
Okay.
And in a minute you'll see
Jessa, you gotta chime it down just so we get through this. So,
and I'm just gonna mute this.
think about it. In the other ones, we set up the crates over there and it was just a little bit further. So if you could grab those 4 crates, they're right in the back.
But I need to get rid of my, you can hear me double. That's what's going on here. So
Well,
give me a moment.
yeah, no, I'm still kind of prepping and
Yeah,
stuff.
set yourself up. I'm doing the same. Let's check in 5 minutes.
Okay. I'm just glad to see a human on the, like, alive. Would you be willing to cut the wood too?
Sure. The whole one?
Yeah. Or I just need a few bites.
Let's you want to toss me one?
Hello, hello, hello. Good.
I know you're not talking to me, but
Nope.
Okay, she is gonna need to go.
Okay, I just want to check. I'm going to put this, I've got this here. So can you see on your end both my cutting board
Yep.
and my face, but you're only hearing me once. You're not hearing double. Okay, great.
Yeah, so that's ideally what I would do too. And why don't I try that?
Yep. And if you know, this is set up as a meeting, not a webinar. And so every single person, I can spotlight, and I might just take my other computer off and just spotlight you. I don't need to really be on this. This is really your class, you know, your teaching.
Well, you know what? Is there just 4 of us?
No, there's actually, I think 5 registrants coming in.
Okay. Well, we'll just have fun. It's nice and small, and I'm a little rusty, and it's all good. So
no, it's great. This is low. This is all like a good test for us, because I've mostly had chefs doing demos like from Israel and from all over the world, but I had Patty Yinich last. I don't know if you know her from PBS, Patty's Mexican Table. You know, you guys know what you're doing. I'm not a cook, chef, demonstrator, class teacher. So
but
ultimately,
you're a believer, and being a believer is most of it.
oh, total believer. I have a quick question. So what I just need to do while you're prepping, oh, that looks so good. You may not need a second camera.
I don't.
No, I don't think so. Because is that your cutting area and your prep area?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's great. Let's do this. I have a question. I'm probably going to wind up spotlighting you, I think is probably what I'll do. We have I don't know why there are people trying to get in. Do you know who Blue Sky Timer is?
I mean, people don't need to get in until,
Totally. But I'm just curious, Blue Sky Timer is not you.
no.
That's not your cell phone. Okay,
No.
great. So I'll just hold that person off for now. I just need to test at the beginning of this. I just wanted to walk you through how we're going to run the first few minutes before I hand it over to you.
Okay.
And you don't have to really watch, but I just need to test my screen. I have a PowerPoint, and I think I'm going to make you a co-host. So
Okay.
give me a moment.
You know, because my computer is so far away, I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah, but just in case,
Yeah.
I'm giving you a co-host in case you need to do anything on your end. I'm going to just show you, do what you need to. I'm going to just test a few things on my end, which is like a PowerPoint slideshow as people come through, and then I'll introduce you, and then I'll welcome you and hand it over to you.
Okay.
Julie, do you want to see your face?
I don't want to see my face,
Okay.
but they might want to. So,
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, so when people enter, this is what they'll see.
okay.
And you can leave your camera on. It doesn't have to be off. It's perfectly fine. I do have your bio there, so people have a chance to read it.
Want me to Zoom link for that?
What?
Do you have a link to join or how?
Okay, Pamela, can you tell me what you just asked me again?
Nothing. Don't worry about me. I'm good.
Okay, I can share the link with my kids to get in, right?
Yeah, you know what? It's probably a panelist link, so hopefully it'll work. But go ahead and share it, and I'll can you guys see this PowerPoint? You can see it just fine.
Yeah.
Great.
This one.
We sold a bunch of cookbooks,
Nice.
so that's nice.
Elliot
Take the dog out.
and John. No, I'm just texting
yeah.
you guys, or I mean emailing both you guys.
Cool.
Julie, you don't need anything from here, right?
No,
Okay.
no, but I do want
This is gonna be condemned.
to condemn.
Yeah, you're not gonna be using any of these.
She's ready to poop.
It's too bright.
I don't think I have a Zoom app, guys.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I'm looking for another panelist. Do you need me to invite you, or were you guys able to get in on your cell phone?
I can get in on my cell phone.
Yeah, Mom, do you want to, I
Just
don't have
use
the Zoom
mine.
app on
Yeah,
this one.
let's just use yours.
And I'm just going to check the box office to make sure I've got no people with questions. Looks like we're good. If you need me to issue you another ticket or get you the link to register, I can send it over to anybody right now.
I think, do you want it, Jess or John? This, I mean, are you fine with?
I just want to see how you look like right now.
Or one of
I wouldn't have that many people trying to help me look good.
You have Zoom? I do have Zoom. Can I give you an email then?
Yeah, hold on, give me a second. I'm going to go ahead and just email you this link to register yourself. Give me 1 second. It's going to come from my personal email right now, but go ahead, give it to me.
Will you give it to her, Jessica?
Oh, me?
Give her your email.
It's JBBG
JBBG.
with number 2, JBBG2
Okay.
at CAM .ac.uk.
Okay. jbbg2@cam.ac.uk.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, so in this email, which is the reminder email to patrons, below it says click here in highlight. Let me know when you get that, and then you can just register whoever you want.
Okay. I'm just waiting.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then I just need to know who to admit. So once it comes up, you pop up, I'll let you know.
Say Jessa.
You're Pamela, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna register as Jessa. That's me.
I just need to see how Julie looks.
Yeah.
This is
And I
Hi, everybody who's joining us today. This is Pamela Lavitt, the Director of Arts and Ideas and Festivals at the Strong Jewish Community Center. We are so happy you're joining us. Hello, it's so nice seeing people's faces. I always do webinar events, and this is just so fabulous. Thanks so much for joining us for today's class with Julie O'Brien. We're just going to give a few more people a chance to connect, enjoy the slideshow, check out some upcoming programs. We are beginning, hopefully, some live programming at our theater, and we'll just check in with you in just a moment when we start. So hang tight. Hi, everybody. Just want to let you know that we'll start the class in just a moment. Make sure you've gathered your materials, and if you did not go online, we have a one sheet. I'm showing it in my other camera over here, which you should have received when you got your confirmation email. It's also on our website at sjcc.org/arts. It has the ingredients and some of the materials you need. It's pretty simple: cutting board, knife. If you haven't made your brine yet, maybe just take a moment to put together your brine, and we'll begin in just a moment. Okay, everybody ready? I'm so excited. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up, everyone. Yay. Okay, fantastic. Hi, everybody. I'm Pamela Lavitt, the Director of Arts and Ideas and Festivals at the Strong Jewish Community Center. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at some of our upcoming programs. We do have an incredible program coming up with SNL stars Lorraine Newman, as well as Alan Zwiebel, who is one of the original writers for Saturday Night Live. It is, we hope, one of our last fully virtual events at the Strong Jewish Community Center. It is taking place on the 29th this month. You can go learn more at sjcc.org/arts and learn more about upcoming programs. Supposedly, I hope in the month of February, we will begin with our first live and virtual. We are installing a live streaming studio, which is not my home today, but in our theater, we are going to have an amazing theater company called The Braid coming, doing a show called True Colors. And it is about Jews of color telling stories about identity, their challenges, as well as how they navigate their lives in the Jewish world, but also in the worlds in which their parents and families also identify. So I think it's going to be an amazing program for Black History Month. It is on February 6th, and we are hoping that folks will come into the theater, but if not, you can buy a ticket and live stream the show. So with that said, there's a lot of other things happening, the Seattle Jewish Film Festival in March, but today, our Sunday, we're joined today. I'm so excited to welcome Julie O'Brien. And Julie O'Brien is co-founder of Firefly Kitchens. I've been a big fan for many years. In our household, there is some fermented kraut in this fridge. I love making, Reubens and things like that. But today, I think we're going to learn a lot more about what you can do with all the fermented product. There's so many different things. And Julie's book, Fresh and Fermented, many of you have purchased. That book will be mailed out next week. So you'll get to learn a lot more from her. I just want to say that her bio was also on our website if you want to check it out fully, but I'm hoping that Julie will maybe tell us a little bit more about her aha moment when she learned about probiotics and when she learned about the amazing crunch, taste, and zest that she's made her living and passion at in Firefly Kitchens. I'm curious, I would love to say to everybody, since this is a small class, Julie and I have both agreed that we should just interact. This is going to be a fairly informal way of doing it, so you can unmute yourselves. And I would just say, if you have questions, we'd love to see you on camera. If you're not comfortable with that, that's fine. But if you do have a question, please feel free to either put it in the chat or just raise your hand or let me know. I'll be moderating this and asking some questions as we go along, but you are more than welcome to pretend that this is a class in a real kitchen, asking real questions, and Julie is open to answering as we go. So without further ado, just wanted to welcome everyone. Thanks for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to Julie.
Hello, thank you for that sweet welcome. And you guys, this is a treat for me to be able to share my passion with you. And I just want to say that I can't see you, and that's hard for me because I'm kind of in between glasses, and I struggle. So I'm really going to rely on Pamela to help me answer questions. And we're super casual here. If you want to just chime in, don't hesitate. I'll also share my information at the end if you want to email me with any questions later. So let's just get started. And my number one goal for today is to have you guys walk away and feel like you have the confidence of how to make a quart of kraut on your counter without any fears, because that is the number one thing that we hear from people, that they're just afraid they're going to kill somebody with making fermented foods. And so I always say, rest assured, these foods have been around in cultures all around the world for thousands of years. And there's not one documented history of anybody ever dying from bad fermented foods. And you know why? It's because your eyes and your nose, which is how we should always be enjoying our food too, is your eyes and your nose would tell you if something was wrong. So if you had a jar of kraut on your counter that should be green and it was black and furry, that is a very good indication you shouldn't eat it. So people die of food poisoning and from everyday regular foods and all the time. And so for 0 cases of anybody dying from bad fermented foods, that makes me feel pretty good. So, and the thing is, salmonella, which is another thing that a lot of people worry about. This is just a completely different process than canning and jarring. And so salmonella doesn't even enter, it's just not anything to worry about. In fact, this food helps prevent you from getting salmonella, or if you're sick, it helps your system heal. The pH of it is so low, Salmonella or E. coli can't even live in there. So before I go down some crazy rabbit hole like I just did, I would love if everybody could just say who they are and let me know if you've ever fermented before, and let me know what you're most excited about learning today. So can everybody just jump in and share that?
Hi, I'm another Julie, and I've never fermented before. So I'm very excited because I love sauerkraut. And I love your firefly sauerkraut.
What are you most excited to learn today?
You know, I think just having my own sauerkraut in my refrigerator, or I don't know, can it be on the counter too? So, you know, just having my own and giving it as gifts too.
I love that thinking, because I think it's the gift that keeps on giving is what I like to say. So good for you, Julie. Who else?
I'm Barbara. I'm actually not in my kitchen today, so I'm just going to watch. But my Polish grandmother always had sauerkraut in a crock in the kitchen, and I've successfully done like in a jar on my countertop. But I'm really curious how to do some of the more exciting and exotic things, like carrots or beets or something.
Awesome. Okay, well, we can talk about that for sure a little bit, but today what I'm really focusing on is the basic premises of lacto-fermentation in cabbage.
Perfect.
Awesome. Who else?
Hi, I'm Susan, and I guess I have done sourdough starter for years and baked bread using sourdough technique and a long, slow ferment. As a kid, I helped with pickle making in my grandparents' household, but I really am, I'm a big fan of fermented foods and eat lots of them, but have never made the kind of ferment that you're doing. So I'm really excited.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And who else?
I will add, so my daughters have got really into fermenting and sourdough starters and things like that during the pandemic, as everybody seems to have done. But I understand there's also a Polish beet fermented drink that I'd like to learn how to make. A cousin of mine, her partner makes it, but I'm really interested in beets and what we can do with beets, because I've done the cabbage before. So today I'm going to be working hopefully with the beet, and we'll see what happens. I don't know if I'll do both, probably, but seeing how you can ferment other vegetables, because I grew up in New York going to like the pickle guys and all of that is pickling, and I love pickled things, but I'd rather make it probiotic.
Right. And that, I'm glad to hear you say that, because there's definitely a difference, you know, health-wise and process-wise.
Yes.
Sometimes people will use the terms interchangeably. You know, I always say the picklers are really riding this fermentation wave, and things pickled with vinegar are not the same thing as lacto-fermentation, where that acid process, you know, is created through the fermentation process. So is this all of us? Should we just get rolling?
This is all of us right now. There are a couple more people that definitely registered, and hopefully they'll pop in, but we should get started.
Just let me know if they do.
Yeah. Yes, and we're recording the class too, so I will share, with Julie's permission, the recording just for people who have purchased tickets.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so, you know, why do we ferment? And I think that's the number one reason why I do it, is because it's just the right thing to do. It's like we're taking a vegetable that we know we need more of, and we are fermenting it, and then it becomes this bionic vegetable. So, you know, the reason people traditionally started fermenting things were because we would have this abundance of vegetables in the fall, and then if vegetables can't get consumed right away, what do? They often go bad, or some are able to be stored in root cellars and stuff. But, you know, in cultures all over the world, what they found is that if they would have this abundance of these veggies, they could salt them and ferment them, and it could get them through the winter. So there's so much history of, you know, you hear about Genghis Khan having it when his troops went off, you know, they would have cabbage or kraut as part of their, you know, their nourishment. We hear about Captain Cook and, you know, people not dying of scurvy after they had sauerkraut. So there's so many different, there's a lot of folklore out there, but at the end of the day, we know it is a really long tradition of how people used to process food. And, you know, one of the number one things people worry about through this fermentation process is they're like, oh, I got to bleach everything. And I'm just so worried. And I'm like, again, they didn't have bleach when they were fermenting things hundreds of years ago. They didn't have probably clean cutting boards. They didn't have dishwashers. So just use good common sense and good basic, you know, cleaning skills. And I always just do a quick rinse of my jars. You know, I make sure they're clean, but I'll rinse it out. If I pull one out of the cupboard, I won't I won't sterilize it in the dishwasher, you know, unless it's been away for the winter. So just do your normal thing. So one of the other reasons why we ferment in times of abundance is, you know, other people just do it because it unlocks all these other nutrients that are bound up in the cabbage. So we know that cabbages are full of anti-cancer nutrients, and you know, there's so many phytochemicals and really good things in here. But this is such a dense vegetable that so often if you eat it raw, your body isn't able to break it all down and get into some of those nutrients that are really bound up in the cell walls. So going through this month-long fermentation process sort of we call it kind of pre-digest. Part of that fermentation process is it's going to start breaking down. So after a month, you're going to have this different texture of a product, and all these nutrients are now available to your body, because it's just like, it's in this like, all right, I'm ready, eat me. So anyway, the whole gist of lacto-fermentation, and people get confused and they think lacto, they think dairy, lactose, but it's lacto-fermentation. And the lactic acid that is created during this process is what gives it that tang and that flavor. And that, you know, the flavor comes from the different spices and other veggies you put in there as well. But the whole process is completely dependent on the salt that you use and creating an anaerobic environment. And so that is an environment where there's no oxygen. So this beautiful process can take place. So that just means that's why we have brine, because ideally what we're going to do is we're going to chop our cabbage and we're going to mix salt with it, and then we're going to start working it. And in the summer, or times where the vegetables are a lot fresher, you're going to get a lot more liquid out of your cabbage than you will in the winter, where a lot of cabbage that's grown around the Pacific Northwest in the winter is considered a storage cabbage. And so it's going to be a little bit denser, a little bit heavier, and it might not yield that much liquid, which is why we made our brine ahead of time. And you know, a brine, a good reminder is, you know, like 1 tablespoon of salt, you know, or 2.5 teaspoons to a tablespoon to every 2 cups of water. I know we sent you guys just the real basic, what you need before the class, and we purposefully, I don't like to share, here's your checklist and your rundown of the recipe, because I think people get so nervous about really following that. My goal for you today is, when we're done, is for you to be able to make this with 100% confidence that you're not going to do anything wrong, that all you need to do is mix some salt. And I'm going to teach you a whole bunch of little techniques to make sure you're that much more capable for success on the other end. But for just a basic cabbage, which is what we'll run through for the first go around, That's all you need. And then we can talk about what happens when you add beets and carrots, because those veggies have a little bit more sugar in them.
Mm.
And then the process of when do you add your spices, you know, and I'll just tell you, you add your spices after you make sure you have your salt content right, because the salt is key. And I would say 99, maybe 95% of the time, if something goes wrong, it's probably quite often that there's just not enough salt in there. And because the salt is really what halts the cabbage from decaying. So I'm going to just pause here for a second, see if anybody has any questions before we dive into salt and actually process.
I have a couple questions, and maybe others do too, but can you give us again the ratio you said of salt to water?
Yes, so in my book, I say 1 1/4 teaspoon to 1 cup of water.
Great.
So that's roughly, you know, if you double it, it's 2.5 teaspoons, but I would just round up to 3, to 3 or a tablespoon.
Great. And like, so I bought this jar at PCC. It only cost about $2. They have lots of different sizes. It's great. But I guess, is there a difference in terms of your jar, like mason jar, the seal and things like that?
So great question. So I just started fermenting with a wide mason jar, and this is all I could find, except for I have a purple one. We got that one, and I wanted to have a clear one so you could see how far up the brine goes. But having a little wider mouth makes it a little bit easier. I think the one thing that is really super helpful if you're doing this regularly is getting a couple of these little funnels, which fit in the small one and the large one, so it doesn't really matter. The reason I think quart jars are so great it's just so easy. It's so easy to monitor. It's let's just dive into some of it. Well, no, let's wait until I'm going to just talk about it now, because then at the end we don't have. There are a lot of people selling a lot of different little things, which are called followers, or just different things that you can shove in a jar to hold the kraut down, because again, we want all of the cabbage to be at a lower level than the brine, so all the bacteria can multiply. You know, that's how they grow. So what I'm going to teach you guys to do today is I don't want you to think you have to go buy anything. It's fun having little gimmicky things, but you don't need them to make a really good batch. What I'll do is I'll use an outer layer of one of the leaves, and I fold it up, and I make like just a little, you know, topper that I can then push down, and then maybe I'll put a rock or the core of the cabbage on the top, and then that's going to push all the cabbage down so it's underneath the brine line.
Nice.
I'll show you also some different tips and techniques to making sure you pack it really tight in the jar.
Yeah.
So there's no air pockets.
So I'm going to give my one last question, and then I'll ask whether or not Susan, Julie, Barbara have other questions. But I took this out of the refrigerator and I immediately went to wash it. And so it's the beet. But either way, what's the philosophy of washing, not washing vegetables? Because my understanding is you're not supposed to wash them.
So that's a great question. And what I would say to that is, I always like organic produce for obvious reasons, but I still, and we at the kitchen will wash them, because I don't think just washing is gonna, you know, I'm not talking about scrubbing. I'm just make sure we do a basic clean rinse. Just in case the guy who is stocking the cabbage at the grocery store, you know, boxes get set on top of each other, and, you know, so I would just say, just use your judgment. If it's clean, sometimes just peeling off one layer of a leaf around the outside is enough, and then just give a little rinse. But if it's organic, I leave the skin on for most things. you know, I think if I do beets, I'll probably just peel like half of it. So there's some of the skin. Again, you know, we want all those organic bacteria that are naturally occurring on the cabbage, because that's basically the whole process. We're going to salt it, and the salt is going to help pull the moisture out of the cell walls, and it's going to keep the bad bacteria at bay, while the good bacteria that come naturally on this eat all the sugars and the starches in the vegetable. And then that's the process of fermentation, and that's what's creating that sour. And so there's not much sugar in cabbage in general, or, you know, in vegetable, not a whole ton of it, but what little there are get consumed in the process, which is another reason why fermented foods are so super good for diabetics, or just for people on a low carb diet, because it's like, we know how good vegetables are for you, and when it's fermented, it's even better, right?
So Julie, maybe let's get started, since it's 2:25, with cutting and stuff. And then if people want to just ask their questions while you're giving some instructions on cutting, we can answer them. And I also welcome everybody. This is informal. So like Julie said, just go ahead and ask your questions.
For sure, for sure. So I'm gonna cut this, set it aside. One thing to think about when you're chopping your veggies is just to kind of keep them uniform, because you want, you know, if you want 1-inch strips or 1/4-inch strips, it doesn't matter. You just want them to be pretty much uniform, so the salt kind of works at it, and so it all ferments at the sort of the same process. So I am gonna, I like to do a thinner shred, just because when I'm fermenting at home, I just like it when I feel like it ferments a little bit faster. But I cut the core out, and I'm gonna set this aside, because we can use this later to help kind of sink the cabbage so there's no little floaters on top. And then, if anybody's watching, I don't really have the best knife skills, so my counters are too high. So anyway, just chop it and try to keep it all about the same. And, you know, for when we teach at the kitchen, you know, we have everything all set out. We have buckets, and it's a lot easier to talk about those, you know, those earmarks. But typically the one head of cabbage, and it's so hard because how much is a head of cabbage? Like these guys, these are literally as big as my head, and so there's no way this whole thing will fit in a jar. This is probably about a 2-quart cabbage. And then sometimes cabbages will have all this air in there, and so that's a bummer too. So just use, you know, just it's roughly about 1 3/4 pound that will end up fitting into a quart. So and so I'm guessing that's going to be even a little bit less than a half a cabbage. Yeah. Okay. So you can use glass bowl, stainless bowl. The trouble with glass bowls is you don't want it to break. And once you get your cabbage in there, you're gonna start pounding it. And so sometimes I'll just use the bottom of a mason jar. And so use whatever. It can even be plastic. I know people who ferment straight in a 5-gallon bucket. They just put cabbage and water and they shake it, and that's what they do. So there's no crazy, I mean, it's science, but it's way more forgiving than baking. I know so many people who are afraid to do it, and I'm like, you make these elaborate, amazing chocolates and pies, but this is just a bunch of cabbage and salt. So here's about 2 quarts, and it's pretty dense. So again, this will be a good exercise for you to see how much it breaks down. But so again, the salt that we're going to use, we're probably going to use, I think, let's just start with about, about just a teaspoon, just.
Billy, I had a question about the salt. So in your instructions, it specifically had said, to use Celtic sea salt, real salt, or Himalayan pink salt. But most of us have, the good old kosher salt in our house, and salt seems critical.
And kosher salt is 100% okay. Sandra Katz, who's like the art of fermentation, that's what he uses, and so I just think it's really important not to use like the non-iodized or iodized salt, Morton stuff. And think about this color. If you have pink salt, black salt, gray salt, the color is the minerals. Color is minerals and vitamins. And so I remember when I was in my nutrition class 15 years ago, sitting there listening to one of my instructors talking, and he was just saying, these salt companies, they mine all their stuff, and then they take out the color and they send it off to supplement companies and sell it, and then they have this pure bleached white sea salt that they can sell at a premium. We've come a long way, and we now want more pure stuff, and there are people talking about the artisan, salts that they promote. So, we at Firefly use the Celtic sea salt because there's just so many nutrients in there, and we really like it. We also add, we mix with a local Sonoma sea salt. So that's what we use at Firefly. If I'm home, when I'm home, I'll use the Celtic salt or this, the pink Himalayan salt. So, and one of the reasons why it's so hard to tell people, I say for about 1 jar, you're going to need probably about a tablespoon of salt. And it's going to basically taste like you really over salted your food. That's the easiest way for me to describe it. And the reason I like to tell people to make this brine first, because when you have that salty brine and you're tasting it just like, you guys should just open your jars and taste it. This is just an easier way to get that saltiness in your mind, because when you start eating the cabbage, you're gonna just go, I can't tell how much is salt, and then you get the sweet little crunchiness from the cabbage. So
it's really big ones. I'm sorry, go ahead. So how much, so if you're doing right now this 2-head or this really big head, are we adding salt directly in here right now?
So again, this is less than half of one of my big ones, and it's, it really should be about, like, if you were one of those people who really like to measure, you could say it's 1.75 pounds. My guess is mine is over 2 pounds, just because it's really dense. So I know I said a teaspoon. Let's just throw I want you to a teaspoon, work your way up to more, but you could just do 2 hearty teaspoons, and then I'm just kind of winging it. The one thing you should know is if you taste it and you're like, oh my God, I think I way overdid it, all you're gonna have to do is add a little bit of water, and that's gonna make the brine less salty. So
Julie, does crystal size matter? I've got Himalayan salt, but it's kind of a larger crystal.
So that's a great question. Thank you. And that is exactly why it is impossible to tell people, a teaspoon or a teaspoon, because this gray salt's
You
heavy
can turn the sound on here.
lies. So if you put that in there, it's going to take a long time for it to really break down for you to be able to taste it. So if it's super big chunks, you might just crush it up a little bit. But, or the other thing you could do is just put a little bit of hot water. You know, you could just, you don't necessarily, you're not pouring hot water in here, but I just, bigger chunks are a little bit harder to get your, it won't affect the long product, but it might affect you in the next 15 minutes that you're trying to really taste to see if you have enough salt. Does that make sense? I hope. Okay, so I've put roughly a tablespoon in. And so what you're gonna do then is just start massaging. You're gonna just start massaging it. And because I have my coarser gray salt, you can kind of feel the chunks in the bottom. And so what we're gonna have to do is start kind of pounding it up a little bit. And so this is just helping, this is kind of like kickstarting the fermentation process, right? We're gonna kind of just massage it, help break the salt down, help get some of the moisture out of the cabbage. And what will happen is a liquid will start to develop at the bottom of your container. And that's the liquid that's going to end up being your brine. When you put all the cabbage in and pack it down, you'll see the brine level kind of come up. It takes a while. And so sometimes people, you know, like if somebody has arthritis, or it just, I love doing this by hand, but my muscles, all these little muscles in the top of my arm get really tired. And I think that just because those muscles don't really get a workout. So I feel like it's hard to really break some of these bigger chunks down. I'm pulling some really big pieces that I didn't quite get them chopped right. You could leave them in there and then you just have chunkier, crunchier bits, little surprises, but it's so not necessary. So here's what I'm going to show you. Some people like to pound things. And so if you get tired of just the massaging, and I'm guessing you probably massage for 10 or maybe 15 minutes, you could put the salt on, rub it a little bit, go walk away, do something else, come back to it. Like there's no race, there's no rush. You know, we like to call this, well, this is wild fermentation. And I guess I'll just take a minute to talk about that. When we ferment, we have cabbage and we have salt and water if needed. That's called wild fermentation. A lot of places will add starter cultures, and they'll do that because they want to stick a bacteria in there that maybe isn't naturally occurring, because it's a great place for that bacteria to proliferate. We want the organic cabbage that we get to do its thing with the bacteria that are naturally occurring. That's why we like organic cabbage. And we don't want to put other weird stuff in there, because people weren't doing that when they started fermenting hundreds of years ago. So anyway, this is, you could just let this sit here, do some other things, and it is just naturally going to pull the water out. But massaging it just helps the process along. This is a pounder that I found in my mom and dad's garage years ago. It's just got a flat end, so you can just sit and whack, 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 whack. And again, I'll maybe do that a little bit, and then I'll come back to massaging a little bit more. If you don't have a pounder, you know, one of those rolling pins that has a flat end works well. You could use a big rock. I love cooking with rocks. I will take the bottom of a mason jar, and you can just do that, and that just kind of helps. So this is especially in the cooler temperatures of the winter, this will take a little bit longer to ferment because really the ideal temperature for it to sit in is probably about 65 degrees. If it gets up much more than 72, the kraut can end up getting soft because it ferments too fast. So, you know, we try to keep our temperature right around 65. If your house is super cold, you know, like, you know, because you're gonna, once this is all done and in the jar, we're gonna pack it down and put a lid on sort of hand tight, and then we're gonna set it aside for 2 weeks at least. I think it takes at least 2 weeks for that crunch to get to where it doesn't just feel like you're eating coleslaw or raw cabbage. And maybe even it just gets better the longer you leave it. And that's where it's hard to find that sweet spot, because you get really excited when you see it sitting on your kitchen counter and bubbling, and kind of fun to walk by and say hi and see what's going on in there. Anyway, so are you guys getting any, liquid? You know, when I do this with summer cabbage, it's just water, salty water is just pouring out, and there's just not that much. We can see it. So.
I see a little bit of wet at the bottom, but I can't say that I'm squeezing it and it's dripping out yet. Anybody else?
Yeah, it's surprising it's not that much. Okay, so here's now what I want you to do. If you feel like it's kind of mixed and your hands are getting tired, reach down into the bottom and just grab a pinch. Like mine tastes good, so that tells me I don't think there's enough salt in there. And it gets really tricky too, because cabbage that you can buy in the winter is really sweeter. It's always sweeter in the winter, and that's because the temperatures that they grow in and being more exposed, they get stressed and they send more sugar into the cabbage. So it really does make it hard to taste that salt. But when I eat it, I'm like, oh, that tastes kind of good. And again, it's hard talking to people about salt because everybody just has such different reactions to salt. Some people think something has too much, and other will eat the same thing and go, wow, that's great. You know, so I just feel like I know mine needs a little more. So what do you guys think?
I'm definitely adding some more because it was pretty palatable as it was.
Yeah, but you really, you should just go, oh my God, I don't want to eat that. And what happens is it just gets neutralized. It just is neutralized once it's just neutralized as the fermentation process happens.
Is there any kind of philosophy to, like, this started out and the cabbage was almost all the way at the top of the bowl, how much it should shrink?
Yeah, so that's the cool thing. Like, I feel like mine has shrunk by about 2/3. And I have a lot more brine now. Do you see that?
Wow.
So, all right, well, if nobody else has any questions, I'm going to just show you how to pack this jar. So again, if you don't have a little funnel, you can just really, drop it in there.
Julia, if you created your brine in somewhere, you're not putting it in the one with the brine yet, right? You're putting it in.
The brine is for you to taste and then probably ultimately top this off.
Great.
And so, I don't think this guy's gonna fit now. So, one of the things you can do is, you could use a rubber spatula and kind of just, see, I'm using just the end of my pounder to kind of push, pack it down, because you want all the little air holes to come out. Or you know what you're gonna do is the brine is gonna go down and tuck in to hopefully all of those little crevasses down low. And then this definitely did not yield. This definitely did not yield as much brine as I wanted it to. But do you see that whole thing? And I had a pretty full bowl. Looks like it did fit in here, which is kind of surprising to me. I would have bet that it was not enough. All right, so I'm just using my fingers to really push and pack. I realized I didn't answer your question earlier about a jar, you know, the different vessels that you can ferment in. So this is just one of those standard Italian with, you know, things with the lock. So I have definitely fermented in these, and these, you know, what's going to happen is this is going to start to ferment, and while the sugars, the bacteria start eating the sugars and the starches in there, the carbon dioxide is going to need to come out. And so it's going to just shoot up, it's going to off gas. And so that's why we say to put the lid on hand tight. If you have an open crock or something like this, this stuff needs to escape. And, you know, there's these different little things you can buy that have airlocks that let things, you know, off gas. But if I were to do it in a jar like this, what I would do is just keep the lid secure, because we don't want stuff getting in. So I would put the lid on, and then what I would do is probably just kind of burp it like every day, just let anything out that might be building up in there. So I realized I didn't ask you guys, when I peeled the outside of my cabbage, I forgot to ask you to save one of the outer leaves if you can. What I usually use is a rock. I like putting a rock in my jar and using this to push down, so it keeps all of these loose little pieces of cabbage down underneath the brine line. But because I have a small, you know, I have not a wide jar, my rock isn't gonna fit in there. Here's like a little glass follower. There's other little silicone things that you can push down there that have a little nipple, so the air can come out. But what I do is I just take a piece of cabbage. You cut off the outside, and well, this is too big for my small jar. Put it in and push it down, and then this is just going to be kind of like a layer. It's like a blanket that will help hold any little chunks that are loose. And then what we can do is take our core that we had in the middle. We can stick, see this? you can just stick the core, so it's pushing down on the little bed of cabbage, the little blanket that's holding all the chunks down. Because anything that's exposed to oxygen is gonna mold. And so that's why having your jar, you're gonna fill, you probably want the product, the cabbage, to come, anywhere from 3/4 all the way up to the maybe about an inch down. Then you're gonna just top it off with your brine you made. And again, in the summer, you might not need this, but in the winter we do. And then also, if this gets really super busy and starts just flowing over, which it probably will, you might need to add a little bit more brine in a week or two if you see your brine levels start retreating. Does that make sense?
So you add the brine after you've put all the other toppings on. Yeah, okay.
And you can add it along as you go, you know what I mean? Because the brine's you don't want to pack your jar too tight because you want the brine to get in there. There's a brine that was in with the product, right? So, I mean, it was already in there. So I have it kind of right up to about 1/4 inch from the top. And now there's all of that stuff under there is protected. So we're gonna just put the lid on.
I would love to see, for those of you that are doing this at home, for us to show you, if you can show the camera what you've got. I know I'd love Julie's check on this, but I wasn't sure if it was too high. And then I put the bottom of the cabbage in and around.
The only reason it would be too high is if like your blanket cabbage came all the way up to the top and there wasn't any brine. Like you just want to make sure that the brine, so like my little core is poking out at the top.
Yeah.
But it's gonna hit the bottom of this, which is gonna keep everything down. So it's almost like a little weight. And then hopefully you can let it go for at least a week, or in 2 weeks if you want to check it.
Susan, let's see yours. I'd love to see. Oh yeah.
Does that look right? Can you see that?
I can.
Are we filling the brine all the way up to the top like she did?
Brine all the way up. And again, I am sure it will leak out because it's going to be active. It's active. And
okay, so I can put a little more in.
I wish I had cut like a thicker core like you did, which is good to know for next time, is that it helps at the top.
yes, and here's what I will do is I will send you a printout of our kind of all the things to keep in mind, which we're still going to talk about a lot of those things on there. But it will have the run through of making sure you save the outer leaves of the cabbage in the core. So I apologize I didn't say that before you jumped in.
So I have enough for 2 jars, I think.
Great.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to do something else. Okay.
This is why I love to start with the classic, because this is just the foundation of every sauerkraut that we make, beyond the carrots and the salsa. So this is just your basic recipe. And so I think your first go around having a plain one and then doing another one that's flavored, it'll be fun for you to test them both and see how they evolve over time. So if the couple of things, what I just want to say is put it on a plate or in a bowl, because it will get active. Keep it out of direct sunlight. and just kind of hand tight, and you will hear it going. It'll probably just from time to time, maybe after 2 or 3 days, it will start being noisy. If it doesn't, don't worry. It's probably just because the temperatures are a little bit cooler and it's just a slower, more gradual process. So if you don't have any more questions about just this basic process, then we can move on and talk a little bit about adding spices and other things to ferment with it. Does that sound good?
Yeah, Julie, I had a quick question. Do you wait a full 2 weeks before you start tasting it?
I think the more you mess with it, the more chance for other stuff to get in there, and you know, your
Right.
other stuff. It's not going to hurt it, but I just think it will taste better. It'll taste so much better between week 1 and week 2. And it's going to taste even better after week 3. And because that's what happens, I think with plain basic kraut, I think 2 weeks is plenty. Some people say, God, it's ready to go in 3 days. I think the pH drops down to about 3. Our stuff is about 3.7 normally, which is really fantastic. And this is that lovely pH that helps your gut digest the food. If you're doing just plain, you don't need it to really taste that much better because it's just the cabbage. Sometimes when you put those other spices and those other veggies in there, that's when letting it wait a little bit longer, because the sugars in the beets and the carrots just they all assimilate at kind of different times. So
Got it. Thank you. Yeah.
okay.
So 2 weeks out of the sunlight, but not in the refrigerator.
Right. If you put it in the refrigerator, that colder temperature, it just slows down all the bacteria. They're moving slower. So it takes a lot longer for all that magic to happen. Right.
How will you know if something goes south? What will you see if it's not going well?
Like, instead of it being, you know, green, maybe it will start to gray, or you know, sometimes things turn pink. I would say, you know, if anything, like if say I put the lid on and then I set this on the counter for 2 months and forgot about it, I think it would probably be 100% fine and it would be really good. That if this evaporated a little bit, the whatever's exposed to oxygen on the top, whatever air gets in there after the liquid's displaced, it's probably going to kind of dry out and turn kind of brown. But so say we take the lid off after a month or 3 weeks, and this is a little bit, you're like, God, it's fine. It still looks like a cabbage core, whatever, just take it out, throw it away. I oftentimes will then go, whoop, and I'll just dump that brine that's kind of floating around there, you know, like the top little layer that was protecting it, and then pull your little blanket out, or your rock, or whatever else you have. And this is why I don't suggest getting into it before, I suggest not getting into it unless you think you're really close, or you're just like, at the end of the day, it's your product, you made it. So if you like it, get into it and enjoy it. So then once you pull that blanket out, then it's all good to go, and everything under there should just be golden. So you sometimes, if the brine starts subsiding and you don't see it, just the top layer will be kind of drier looking, or kind of brown or gray. You could just again, we don't do this at work because we have a different method and everything, but I would just take my fingers in there and do kind of a swoop around, and I throw that stuff out, And you can just see it'll be bright green, and then there's a little bit of a layer. So it's just, you know, it's not, the thing is, it just might not taste as good as the stuff underneath it. It's not gonna be bad, and it's not gonna kill you. So use your nose. So anybody else, any other questions?
Is everybody okay sticking around for another, 10, 15 minutes while we go over doing carrots or other kind of things?
So-
Spicing?
Sure.
So, with things like carrots and beets and fennel, and I grabbed these guys just because these are some of my most favorite ones to ferment with. You know, hardy, dense root vegetables are really good. These three particularly. There's quite a bit more sugars in carrots and beets, and so what I would do with this is, cut it, clean it, maybe keep some of the skin on. You could chop them all so they're like uniform little chunks, or you could shred them. The thing with beets, because of the sugar content, it could go it could go a little bit alcoholic on you. So it goes back to, so that's why, like fruits, if you add in any fruits, it's just less is more, like maybe a half an apple, and then you're going to compensate and add a little bit more salt. So I know I'm saying a lot of different things. So the number one thing I want to say, when you start adding in, so say we just took our plain cabbage based kraut and we added, say our curtido is carrots, onions, oregano, and jalapeno. So I would say probably the equivalent, maybe 2 carrots would go if you were gonna, try to recreate the curtido, and and a quarter of an onion. I would again clean them up. I would leave the skin on because they're so damn good. I would shred them or just make them thin, like maybe julienne. These are going to ferment. If you shred carrots, kind of like with a cheese shredder, they're going to ferment a lot faster than this thick, dense cabbage. So again, just keep in mind when you're mixing different things together, like carrots and with this, be mindful about the uniform size. But again, there's no rules. You may want to just, sometimes I'll just blend up an apple and throw one in there. That's a bad example. I shouldn't talk about apples because they do have a lot more sugar, but I'm just saying that the flavor and the fibers can be in there, and it doesn't have to ferment it the same as this because it's doing something different. It's going to combat some of the garlic and horseradish and all that other really intense stuff. And that's the only reason I would put an apple in. But what I'm trying to say is, so say you're going to add a jalapeno, you can use fresh or dried. What we want to do is make sure your salt of just your basic cabbage and your vegetables, make sure the salt is your saltiness that you want, and then add that oregano and the jalapeno, because it's too hard to gauge the salt level when you start getting those spices in there. Does that make sense?
Definitely. If you were doing the beets in chunks, what timing would you suggest for that?
I would put them in there in the beginning. You could throw them all in there. So say we're gonna just do the same thing, like about 2 quarts of rough cabbage, which is a little less than 2 pounds, and you're gonna have all your cabbage, and you're gonna say make little tiny diced chunks of beets and carrots. Maybe you're gonna put half a beet in, 2 small carrots. I would probably up the salt almost by another teaspoon. just to compensate. But again, there's no magic. There's no magic formula. We just don't know what the sugar content is in what we're working with, right? So once I mix all that, and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty salty, but I got that extra sugar in there. I know it's gonna work. Then rest assured, then you throw your jalapeno and your oregano in. And there's a gazillion recipes out there, that can give you kind of guidelines. And I can even send over some rough, or they're in my cookbook, like we have almost like a quart breakdown version of all of our recipes in there. So things like turmeric, adding something like turmeric for a quart, I kind of am like, oh, it's good for you, let's add a lot. But then the turmeric is just so intense. And so I've kind of learned, all right, we'll back up a little bit and add a teaspoon of turmeric, not 2, and then just add some other, garlic or horseradish or other stuff in there. So does anybody have any other questions about adding other ingredients?
Do you have to do the beet or the carrot with cabbage, or can you just do beets and carrots together?
You could totally do them together, and I can tell you after the ratio. I can't that.
Okay. Get the cookbook. This is a good plug.
With carrots, carrots are hard, and carrots have the tendency, they will do with this thing. There's this yeast it's called calm yeast, and it's harmless. But what will happen with the carrots sometimes is it typically doesn't happen until after they've been opened and you get into them, and then they get a little taste of what's floating around. Then what happens is there will just be this white stuff that starts growing on the top, and I really don't like it. So I'll just typically pitch it, but that can happen. And it sometimes just looks sometimes like fur just across the top of it. So with things like just carrots, you have to be really careful. And same with the beets. It's just, in Sally Fallon's book, Nourishing Traditions, which is how I learned to ferment, she says, I almost quick blanch beets before I ferment them now, because the sugar, it can just go. What happens is it just can it gets a little bit sweeter and almost a little bit boozy sometimes. I can definitely share some recipes with you, but I just don't really do that. So I don't want to, my guidance is just make sure you use enough salt.
So maybe in conclusion, because obviously many of us came to this class because we've had sauerkraut, either family traditions, ethnic history, or just because we really wanted to learn a simple way of making something that we can eat all the time. But you use this in a lot of different things, smoothies, desserts. So is there some trick after this is ready to what we can do to use all of the other deliciousness of this product?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that, because that's what excites me the most is like here, we have this really awesome, healthy product you just made, right? You see how easy that is. So many people are like, well, I don't know what to do with it. Or, I could put it on my hot dog, or people come with such enthusiasm and they say, I'm going to make my auntie's borscht, or like they're gonna make some stew, and they just are proud that they're gonna cook that jar of sauerkraut all day because it's the key thing, it's the key thing their grandma used to put in there. But I think you can add a forkful. Think about every time you're cooking where you need an acid, either vinegar or citrus. I think that I just tell chefs or everyday people, think kraut, because the acidity that flavor profile, the acid profile is accomplished by this. And so, you know, you're not going to get the orange or the lemon out of this, but what you're going to get is that boost. So I'll throw in a fruit smoothie instead of doing sweetened yogurt. You know, I'll use plain kraut, a forkful or two of kraut, and then some nut milk. So then you get the creaminess from the nut milk, and you get the tangy and the tart from the kraut. And then you have all your other fruit in there. So it's just a really good fruit smoothie. I'll blend up this plain kraut. And we have another product I should actually, this, because I believe so much in these foods, we made a product called Probiotics, and it's just basically blended up sauerkraut. So it's like applesauce. And my mom has Alzheimer's. She can't, and she has some health issues. And so the caregiver, she blends up kraut with an apple. So it's like applesauce. It's not sweet. It's great because she's a diabetic, and it's all blended up. And then she puts a bunch of cinnamon. And so when it's in a different format, then you can stir it into everything. You can stir it into, you know, you can put a spoonful in your oatmeal. You can throw it in risotto. You know how often we'll squeeze lemon in risotto at the end? You can stir in a bunch of plain kraut or kimchi, and it just adds that light, zingy, bright flavor. Plus it helps you digest it. So I'll mix it with peanut butter, unsalted peanut butter. So for people who want to get healthy krauts into their kids who won't, you know, who are finicky, it's right in their peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So
amazing. So I just want to thank you so much for, you know, taking the time to teach us the basics. It sounds like we just hit the tip of the kraut basically today. I'm eager to get all my vegetables fermented, but are there any other last questions? Otherwise, we're going to say thank you so much. Let's give a big round of applause to Julie for helping us with our first attempt.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome. And I will I'll share our little one-page flyer that has, you know, just kind of the recap and tips and tricks, and my email will be on there in case you have any questions for follow-up or need clarification.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you all for spending, you know, an hour of your time. Hopefully it was productive and enjoyable, and wishing everybody a wonderful Martin Luther King Day tomorrow. And thank you again, Julie and Firefly Kitchens, for being our partner on today's class. Stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Thank
Julie,
you.
any final words? Yeah.
What I wanted to just say is that we are on Instagram and Facebook, and we love sharing. We love sharing recipes. We have an updated website. We ship all around the country. We're getting ready to put together a kids club, like kids who eat kraut, because I hear from moms all the time who just say, my kid will eat your carrots, but they won't eat any other vegetables. Or and then we're also doing a forkful campaign where we're going to start in February and try to just help encourage people who are trying to create some new habits. Just add a forkful to your day to see what it can do for you. So I'll share with you some information on that. And we always love any feedback, because our customers are the ones, that's the reason we're doing this. And so we love it when people who love what they're eating share.
Great. Well, we'll send that out to everybody who's purchased a ticket for today's class, the resources and some of the links to those upcoming kids and kraut and probiotic classes that you mentioned. So thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful Sunday. Please take care. Bye-bye.